Paying taxes. It's the law, or is it? Indonesia, like every country, needs money to function. Schools, roads, hospitals, these things don't pay for themselves. That's where taxes come in. They're the government's way of collecting revenue to fund public services. It's a pretty simple idea, right? You make money, you pay your share. Except, well, things aren't always that straightforward, especially when it comes to the Indonesian cigarette industry. Now, let's be clear, this isn't about some dude selling loose cigarettes on a street corner. This is about big tobacco companies playing fast and loose with the rules to avoid paying their fair share. We're talking about a system where profits are high and taxes are suspiciously low. This is where things get a little murky. See, there's a difference between what the law says you should do and what actually happens. It's like the difference between a friend who claims they can eat an entire pizza by themselves, spoiler alert, they can't, and the reality of them tapping out after 3 slices. And let's be real, the Indonesian cigarette industry loves a good loophole more than a smoker loves a fresh pack. Das Sollen versus das sein, when rules meet reality. Germans have a way with words, especially when it comes to describing complex concepts. Take das Sollen and das sein, for instance. Don't worry, we'll spare you the pronunciation. Das Sollen is basically the ideal world where everyone follows the rules. Think of it as the tax code utopia. Das sein, on the other hand, is the real world where things are a little messier. Imagine a pristine public restroom. The signs all say, please keep our restrooms clean. That's das Sollen. Now, picture that same restroom after a music festival. Let's just say it's not so pristine anymore. That's das sein. In the case of Indonesia's cigarette industry, das Sollen is the tax code, clear as day. But das sein, well, it's a different story. Companies are finding ways to bend the rules, making it look like they're paying their taxes when they're really not. The rise of the virtual cigarette peddler. Here's where things get even more interesting. We're not just talking about your typical cigarette companies here. We're talking about something called virtual entities. These aren't your tech startups with fancy websites and stock options. They're more like informal networks operating under the radar. Think of them like pop-up shops, but for cigarettes. They're everywhere, from small kiosks to roadside stalls. And they all have one thing in common. They don't like to leave a paper trail. No receipts, no invoices, no problem. Or so they think. These virtual entities are like ghosts in the financial system. They move their product, make their money, and disappear into thin air, leaving the tax man scratching his head. No receipt, no problem. The art of disappearing sales. Here's the thing about taxes. You can't pay what you don't declare. And when you're dealing with a bunch of virtual cigarette sellers who don't issue receipts, it becomes really hard to track how much money is actually changing hands. It's like trying to count how many pigeons are in a park. You might get close, but you'll never know for sure. This lack of documentation is a gift for companies trying to dodge taxes. They can underreport their sales, making it look like they're selling way fewer cigarettes than they actually are. And fewer sales mean less tax to pay. It's a pretty sweet deal if you can get away with it. Section 5. The middlemen and the dirty money trail. Now, let's talk about the middlemen, the main distributors who act as the bridge between the cigarette manufacturers and the retailers. They're the ones responsible for getting the cigarettes from the factory to the streets. And let's just say they're not exactly incentivized to rock the boat. Remember all that dirty money we talked about? The money that's being made under the table? Well, it flows through these middlemen like water. They're the ones who benefit most from keeping the system rigged. After all, more money for them means less for the government. Section 6, the business purpose test, separating real deals from dodgy schemes. So how do you catch a company that's trying to pull a fast one on their taxes? Well, one way is to use something called the business purpose test. It's a fancy way of saying, show me the receipt, literally. The idea is simple. Every business transaction should have a legitimate reason behind it. Let's say a company claims they're losing money hand over fist and therefore can't pay taxes. But then you look at their books and you see they just bought their CEO a solid gold yacht. That's a bit suspicious, don't you think? That's where the business purpose test comes in. It helps investigators separate the real deals from the dodgy schemes designed to evade taxes. Section 7. Back-to-back loans, a financial shell game. Imagine a game of three-card Monty, but instead of cards, it's money, and instead of a street corner, it's the global financial system. That's kind of what back-to-back loans are like. It's a way for companies to move money around in a way that makes it look like they're not making any profit and therefore don't have to pay taxes. It's complicated, but basically, a company loans money to another company, which then loans it back. They do this over and over again, making it nearly impossible to track where the money is coming from or going to. It's like a financial shell game designed to confuse and confound tax authorities. Section 8. Java's shadowy cigarette network. Let's take a trip to Java, shall we? Specifically, Central and East Java, where a curious thing is happening. There's been a surge in the number of small cigarette manufacturers popping up. Now you might think, that's great, more competition. But here's the catch, these companies aren't really in the business of making cigarettes. They're in the business of gaming the system. See, in Indonesia, cigarette manufacturers need to buy excise stamps to legally sell their products. These small companies buy up a bunch of stamps and then sell them to the big boys at a premium. It's a way for the big companies to get around paying the full amount of excise tax. Section 9. Tax dodging, a bigger problem than you think. This isn't just about cigarettes, folks. This is about a system that's rigged in favor of the wealthy and powerful. When corporations and rich individuals don't pay their fair share, it's the rest of us who are left to pick up the tab. Schools go underfunded, roads crumble, and hospitals are stretched thin. This is about more than just money. It's about fairness. It's about ensuring that everyone plays by the same rules. It's about creating a system where everyone contributes their fair share so we can all benefit from a more prosperous and equitable society. So, the next time you see a pack of cigarettes, remember this: the true cost of that pack goes far beyond the price tag. It's a cost that's borne by all of us, whether we realize it or not. And it's a cost that we can no longer afford to ignore.